The desert stretched endlessly, a barren expanse of sand and jagged rock that glowed gold under the late afternoon sun. SEAL Team 7 moved in precise formation, their boots kicking up small clouds of dust with every step. It was supposed to be a routine training exercise, a coordinated operation testing endurance, navigation, and comms protocols, but nothing about that day would be routine. Chief Mason, a veteran of over a dozen classified operations, led the six-man team. He scanned the horizon constantly, eyes sharp beneath his tactical helmet. The desert was merciless, with cliffs and hidden ravines threatening to swallow an unprepared team whole. They had trained for every conceivable scenario: navigation errors, equipment malfunctions, even sudden ambushes. Yet nothing could prepare them for the chaos that was about to erupt. It started with the radios. A crackle at first, just static, but then the transmissions began to warp. Words that should have been clear came out as distorted, fractured bursts of sound. Team 7, position. Over. The rest was lost to interference. Mason frowned, kneeling to check his radio. The signal was patchy, hopping in and out, weak. He called the operators to form a tight circle. "Stay close and keep comms on," he said, voice calm but firm. Their training kicked in and they adjusted antennas, checked power sources, and retried every channel. The desert swallowed their words. Hours passed and the static became more erratic. It was no longer just environmental noise. There were patterns, unmistakable rhythmic bursts hidden beneath the interference. Mason's team noticed it too, but there was no time to analyze. The wind was picking up, blowing sand in sharp stings across exposed skin. Visibility dropped in seconds. The terrain that had been navigable moments before now seemed alien and hostile. Paths that should have led to the next waypoint were obscured, rocky ridges rising where the team expected open plains. Back at the operations center, the anxiety was building. Screens showed the team's projected route, yet the trackers indicated an anomaly. The SEALs were no longer following their planned course. GPS data was fragmented, corrupted by static bursts that masked any clear reading. Command scrambled support teams, drones, helicopters, and UAVs, swooping over the desert like mechanical vultures, scanning for the first sign of life. But the desert had swallowed the team whole. Emily Hart, an intelligence analyst, sat quietly in a corner of the operations center, headphones on, eyes glued to her workstation. She had been there for hours, sifting through transmissions, analyzing patterns that everyone else dismissed as nothing more than interference. Emily had a reputation for patience and precision. Her colleagues often joked that she could find a needle in a haystack, or more accurately, detect a faint pulse under miles of static. And today, she was about to prove why. Replaying the recordings for the 20th time, Emily noticed something subtle. Beneath the chaotic static was a distinct rhythm, almost imperceptible: 3 short bursts, a pause, then 2 longer ones. Most analysts would have ignored it. It could have been random interference, a glitch in the transmission equipment. But Emily's instincts screamed otherwise. The sequence was deliberate, methodical, too structured to be accidental. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she isolated frequencies, layered waveforms, and enhanced the signal. The pulse grew clearer, a faint but unmistakable geolocator beacon embedded in the comms. She leaned forward, holding her breath, knowing exactly what she was hearing. It was an emergency identifier, something only trained SEALs carried for extreme scenarios. They had triggered it intentionally, signaling that they were in imminent danger, possibly trapped or immobilized. Emily's heart raced. She had seen analysis errors before, misread patterns, wasted hours on nothing, but this felt different. This was real. She adjusted triangulation tools, comparing signal strength across multiple antennas. Slowly, a possible location emerged, miles from the team's expected path. If she was right, the SEALs were alive, but trapped in hostile terrain with no means to communicate. Across the operations center, senior officers debated their next move. "We can't send a team into unknown terrain based on a single static burst," one argued. "It's probably just noise." Another shook his head. "Command, we have no visual, no confirmation. We can't risk lives on speculation." Emily felt the weight of their doubt pressing down on her. She stood, approaching the commanding officer's desk, her report in hand. "Sir," she said, voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins, "I've isolated the SEAL's geo-identifier from the static. I can pinpoint their location. They're alive and they're trapped." The room fell silent. Officers exchanged skeptical glances. Emily ignored them, connecting her laptop to the large display screen. She replayed the filtered signal. The distinct 3N2 burst pattern emerged, repeating over and over. It was unmistakable. One commander stepped closer, leaning over the display. "If you're right," he murmured, "this changes everything." Emily nodded, adjusting the coordinates on the map. The potential extraction zone was remote, surrounded by rocky ridges and narrow canyons, difficult terrain for even a SEAL team. Every second mattered. Delay could mean capture or worse. Meanwhile, miles away, SEAL Team 7 huddled in a shallow depression behind a rock formation. Their mission had gone wrong in minutes. A miscalculated landing point, a sudden dust storm, and equipment failures left them exposed. They were dehydrated, exhausted, and running low on supplies. Comms had failed entirely. Every rustle of sand or distant echo made them tense, muscles coiled for a fight they weren't sure they could survive. Chief Mason checked his watch, whispering orders to keep the team calm. As night approached, the desert cooled and shadows grew long and threatening. The SEALs improvised a low-frequency static pulse, hoping that anyone might detect it. They had no idea if it would work, but they had to try. Somewhere behind screens and monitors, someone had to be listening, and someone was. Emily replayed the static again, zooming in on the faint pulse. Her fingers flew across the interface as she adjusted filters and triangulated the signal's origin. Sweat trickled down her back, unnoticed, as she realized she had a possible fix on the team's exact location. She stood, gathering her notes, ready to take her findings directly to the commanding officer. Time was slipping away. Outside, the wind howled through the desert, sand biting at rocks and skin alike. Inside, Emily Hart prepared to change the course of a mission that had begun like any other, turning doubt and static into hope. Somewhere in the dark expanse of the Arizona desert, SEAL Team 7 had no idea rescue was on its way, and that the person who would save them wasn't wielding a weapon, but a laptop and unparalleled focus. Emily Hart had always been the quiet one in the operations center. Analysts came and went, field operators boasted about their combat experience, and commanders ruled with confident authority. She had no medals, no battlefield stories, and no commanding presence, but she had an ear for what others dismissed. While most relied on equipment, Emily relied on patience, intuition, and relentless attention to detail. And today, her skills would be tested like never before. Hours after the SEALs went dark, Emily remained at her station, headphones clamped over her ears. The room buzzed with activity, screens flashing movement patterns, GPS anomalies, and procedural checklists. Senior officers barked orders to coordinate search parties, but Emily's eyes stayed fixed on a single waveform. At first glance, it looked like nothing. Broken static, distorted audio, the random crackle that had frustrated analysts all afternoon. But Emily knew better. She replayed the transmission again and again. 3 short bursts paused too long, a pattern deliberate, intentional. Her pulse quickened. Her instincts told her this was no accidental interference. The SEALs, trained to survive in impossible conditions, had activated their emergency signal. It was faint, barely above the desert's electronic noise, but it was there. She enhanced the audio, isolating frequencies most would never consider relevant. Layer after layer, she stripped away what seemed random until the signal revealed itself clearly, insistent and precise. Emily leaned closer, examining every spike, every irregularity. The bursts were coded, a simple geo-identifier used by SEAL teams in extreme situations. They were alive, but trapped. She jotted notes furiously, calculating probable locations. Triangulating using multiple receiver antennas, she pinpointed a region far from the SEAL's expected route. The numbers didn't lie. The team had gone off course, forced by terrain, wind, or a sudden malfunction. They were miles behind where anyone believed possible. If rescue didn't arrive soon, dehydration, exposure, or capture would be inevitable. The operations center was alive with activity, but Emily's voice remained unheard. Officers debated procedures, arguing over resource allocation. "We can't risk a helicopter based solely on static," one barked. "It's probably interference," another said dismissively. Emily's jaw tightened. She knew better. Lives depended on acknowledging what others refused to see. She stood, carrying her laptop and a stack of notes, walking straight to the commanding officer's desk. "Sir," she said, steady but urgent, "I've isolated the SEAL's geolocator signal from the static. I've triangulated their position. They're alive and they're trapped." The commanding officer, Colonel Drake, raised an eyebrow, skepticism etched into his weathered face. "Emily, this is based on static. You're telling me our team's location depends on you analyzing noise?" "Yes, sir," she replied, voice unwavering. "I've verified it across multiple receivers. The pulses are deliberate. They match the SEAL's emergency protocol. If we act now, we can locate them before they run out of time." A murmur spread across the room. Senior officers exchanged glances. Most saw only a young analyst, a quiet woman who had never led a mission, never carried a weapon into hostile territory. How could she have the key to saving an elite SEAL team? But the signal spoke for itself. Emily connected her laptop to the main screen, replaying the audio after filtering out environmental noise. There it was, 3 short bursts, paused too long, repeated. A faint geo-identifier, coded, persistent. Colonel Drake leaned in, squinting at the waveform. He could see the rhythm, the deliberate spacing of the pulses. He had spent decades in the field, and even he could sense the urgency in the analysis. "Coordinates?" he asked. Emily brought up a map overlay. Red dots marked the expected route. A green circle highlighted the pinpointed location. "This is where the signal is strongest," she said. "If we deploy a rescue team here, we can reach them in under 2 hours. Delay any longer and the risk increases exponentially." The room fell into tense silence. A lieutenant muttered under his breath, "We're risking helicopters based on a signal." Another officer, less skeptical, began recalculating drone sweep patterns using Emily's coordinates. The data matched. Her triangulation had worked. The impossible suddenly seemed possible. Meanwhile, miles away in the desert, SEAL Team 7 had hunkered down behind a jagged rock outcrop. The sudden dust storm had forced them far off course, and now they were running low on water. Chief Mason checked his team silently. Each man was bruised and exhausted, but they had trained for worst-case scenarios. They improvised low-frequency bursts through their radios, hopping against odds that someone would notice. Minutes stretched into agonizing hours. Every rustle, every distant sound made muscles tense, weapons tight, and breaths held. They were blind, isolated, and dependent on someone far away whose only tool was intelligence and intuition. Mason whispered words of encouragement, steadying his team. "We survive together. Keep low. Keep quiet. Someone's listening." Back at the operations center, Emily double-checked every calculation. She isolated the signal once more, enhancing it until even the faintest pulse was undeniable. She called in mapping officers to validate her triangulation. Together, they cross-referenced satellite data, environmental conditions, and antenna ranges. Every factor confirmed her estimate. Colonel Drake finally nodded. "Prepare the rescue teams. We're moving based on her coordinates." The room erupted into controlled chaos, operators coordinating helicopters, drones sweeping the area, support teams readying for rapid deployment. Emily remained seated, headphones on, monitoring frequencies in real time. Every second counted. Every miscalculation could mean disaster. Her heart raced as she replayed the static for the final time. The pulses were faint, nearly lost beneath the desert interference, but they persisted, a lifeline buried in noise. Somewhere beyond the sand and rocks, Mason and his team clung to survival. Somewhere, she was their only hope. Hours had passed since the team went silent. The sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of deep orange and red. Emily felt the tension building, a mixture of fear, focus, and determination. She had no weapon, no field training, but she had the signal, the data, and the ability to interpret it when no one else could. That was enough. It had to be. As night fell, helicopters prepared to lift off. Their pilots briefed on Emily's coordinates. Rescue operators checked gear, weapons, and navigation devices. All eyes would soon be on her analysis. Lives would depend on every calculation, every waveform she had decoded. Emily took a deep breath, steadied herself, and watched as the first team began to move. Somewhere in the desert, SEAL Team 7 had no idea that hope had arrived in the form of a quiet analyst, seated far from danger, guiding their extraction through nothing more than sound, intuition, and determination. Emily Hart had just become the linchpin between life and death. The night ahead would be brutal, unpredictable, and terrifying. But for the first time since the static began, there was a chance. And sometimes, in situations like this, chance was everything. Night had fully descended over the Arizona desert, turning sand and rock into shifting shadows. Inside the operations center, the only constant was Emily Hart's quiet focus. Her workstation glowed with waveforms, spectrograms, and filtered audio streams, each displaying fragments of a signal no one else had managed to isolate. She leaned forward, headphones pressed firmly to her ears, eyes darting between screens, adjusting filters, and measuring signal strength with precise, calculated movements. The static pulses from SEAL Team 7 were faint, irregular, almost imperceptible amid the electronic noise of the desert and interference from distant communication towers. But Emily had spent hours dissecting every pattern, every anomaly. 3 short bursts, pause, 2 long bursts. The code was repeated with a rhythm that no interference could mimic. Someone had sent it deliberately. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, manipulating frequencies, amplifying faint peaks, and mapping amplitude variations across multiple receiver stations. Emily plotted the strongest signal points on layered topographic maps, accounting for wind, terrain elevation, and antenna interference. Slowly, a pattern emerged. Triangulation revealed a small, isolated canyon system, far off the SEAL's planned route. Her heart quickened as she realized the implications. If she was correct, the team was alive, but trapped, miles behind enemy lines, exposed to the elements and unknown threats. Across the room, senior officers debated the next steps. "We can't deploy a helicopter based solely on a speculative signal," one argued. "The terrain is unpredictable, visibility is low, we risk losing both teams." Another officer muttered about false positives, static anomalies, and wasted resources. Emily didn't flinch. She had verified the triangulation across 3 separate receiver stations, checked atmospheric interference models, and correlated environmental data. This was no speculation. Lives depended on her calculations. She connected her laptop to the main screen and began a live demonstration. "Here," she said, pointing to a cluster of waveforms. "The bursts here are the strongest. The timing aligns with SEAL Team 7's emergency identifier protocol. I've cross-referenced it across 3 antennas. The signal origin falls precisely within this canyon system." Colonel Drake leaned closer, scrutinizing the map. "If this is accurate, the team is miles from their last known position, in rugged terrain. Extraction is dangerous." Emily's gaze didn't waver. "Sir, time is critical. They have minimal supplies, limited water, and no comms. If we delay, the risk increases exponentially. I've validated these coordinates. This is our best chance." The room fell into tense silence. A lieutenant finally spoke. "Coordinates confirmed by triangulation, sir, could be accurate." Drake nodded slowly. "Prepare extraction teams. We'll move on these coordinates immediately." Meanwhile, deep in the canyon, Mason and his team were running on adrenaline and training. The dust storm earlier had thrown them miles off course, and their GPS units were either destroyed or hopelessly inaccurate. Every rock face, every shadow, seemed to hold potential threats. The team had taken cover behind a low ridge, improvising defensive positions. Low-frequency bursts of static had been transmitted from their radios, a last-ditch attempt to reach anyone listening. They waited, muscles taut, eyes scanning darkness. Footsteps echoed across rocks. Distant howls of desert wildlife added to the tension. Mason whispered, "Stay calm, stay low, keep moving only when necessary." Their radios were dead beyond the static bursts, leaving them completely isolated. Fear and determination mingled as they realized that survival depended entirely on someone noticing the faint signal they'd sent into the void. Back in the operations center, Emily worked furiously. She adjusted her software to account for signal degradation caused by atmospheric conditions and sand interference. Each recalculation refined her coordinates, narrowing the potential extraction zone from several square miles to a single canyon intersection. Her pulse raced. If she was even slightly off, the seals might remain undetected, potentially fatally exposed. She made a critical decision. Emily called the mapping officer over. "Compare my final coordinates with terrain data," she instructed. "Check for visibility, slope angles, and potential landing zones for helicopters. Every factor must align for a safe extraction." The officer worked alongside her, astonished at her precision and rapid problem-solving. Minutes later, the officer nodded. "Coordinates verified. This is as exact as we can get without visual confirmation." Emily exhaled, barely noticing. She had a plan in motion, but the night was far from over. Every second the team remained trapped increased the danger. Enemy scouts, desert wildlife, dehydration, and exhaustion all threatened the SEALs. Helicopters could arrive only if her calculations were flawless. Colonel Drake, still skeptical but trusting the data, gave the orders. Rescue teams would be deployed immediately, guided solely by Emily's analysis. Drones were launched first, sweeping the area for any heat signatures. Their cameras returned only dust, shadows, and the occasional desert animal. But Emily's pulse quickened when she noticed a tiny anomaly in the drone feed, a slight heat signature partially obscured by a rock overhang. Could this be Mason's team? Back in the canyon, Mason adjusted his team's position. "We have to stay put," he said. "Any movement could compromise our cover." Yet even in the darkness, he felt the team's morale shifting, a subtle hope that someone might be searching for them. Hours of isolation had worn them down, but the faint static pulse continued, a digital lifeline, unnoticed by the untrained ear, yet guiding rescue teams closer. Emily monitored every signal, cross-referencing updates from multiple drones, satellites, and sensors. The room buzzed with activity, but she stayed focused, unflinching, calculating risks, predicting terrain challenges, and guiding the operators through her findings. She could almost hear the team breathing across the canyon. The distance was impossible, yet she knew where they were. She had to ensure the rescue teams would reach them safely. Then came the first breakthrough. A secondary signal from Mason's team, slightly stronger, confirmed Emily's triangulation. She leaned forward, whispering almost to herself, "They're here." Every officer in the room turned toward her. "Sir, we have a confirmed lock on the team. Rescue teams can proceed immediately. Extraction is possible." Colonel Drake's eyes widened. "This is impressive," he said. "We're deploying now. Get the teams moving." Emily quickly relayed coordinates, confirmed safety parameters, and continued monitoring. Outside, helicopters prepared for the challenging desert insertion, unaware of the danger awaiting them. Emily's calculations were the difference between success and failure, and she knew it. Miles away, Mason and his team huddled in shadows, listening for signs of movement. The wind howled through the canyon, bringing a chill and the faintest hint of approaching rotor blades. They didn't yet know that someone had heard them, interpreted their signal, and was orchestrating their rescue from hundreds of miles away. Emily, headphones still clamped to her ears, smiled faintly. She had no weapon, no combat experience, yet she was about to guide an elite SEAL team to safety. Every second mattered, every calculation was critical, and every pulse of static brought them closer to survival. As the first helicopters prepared to lift off under night cover, Emily's calm focus anchored the operations center. The next phase, the actual rescue, would test every calculation, every prediction, and every ounce of nerve. But she had done her part. The SEALs were alive. The signal was decoded. Now the team had a chance. And sometimes, in situations like this, a chance was all that mattered. The operations center was alive with controlled chaos. Monitors flickered with real-time drone feeds, satellite overlays, and live communications from teams preparing for deployment. Officers barked orders, operators ran through checklists, and technicians adjusted antennas and signal boosters. Yet amid the storm of activity, Emily Hart remained calm, laser-focused, her fingers dancing across the keyboard, headphones locked firmly in place. Every second mattered. Every mistake could cost lives. Emily knew the hardest part wasn't isolating the SEAL's signal. It was convincing command that her calculations, based solely on static pulses, were accurate enough to deploy a rescue team. Senior officers were skeptical. After all, she was a quiet analyst who had spent years behind a desk, unnoticed in the background, her work undervalued by those in the field. Today, that would change. "Colonel Drake," Emily began, connecting her laptop to the main display, "I've filtered the static, cross-referenced the geolocator pulses across 3 separate receiver stations, and accounted for environmental interference. The SEAL's position is here," she said, highlighting a small canyon system miles off their expected route. "We can reach them if we act immediately. Delay any longer and the risks multiply exponentially." Drake narrowed his eyes. "Emily, this is unconventional. Deploying a helicopter to a canyon based solely on static analysis is risky. Terrain is rugged, visibility is limited, and we have no visual confirmation. If we're wrong, we put both teams at risk." Emily met his gaze without hesitation. "Sir, I understand the risk, but the alternative is doing nothing. The team is running low on supplies, no comms, and exposure is increasing. My triangulation has been verified across multiple receivers and environmental models. This isn't guesswork, it's precise." A murmur spread across the room. Other officers exchanged glances, some skeptical, some curious. One mapping officer stepped forward. "Colonel, I've cross-referenced Emily's coordinates with topographic data, slope angles, and possible landing zones. It aligns perfectly. We've done everything we can to validate it." Drake exhaled slowly, considering. "Fine, we deploy, but the extraction will be dangerous. We need recon first. Drones sweep the area for heat signatures and movement." Emily nodded, bringing up the latest drone feed. Dust and shadows dominated the images, but she zoomed in on a faint, partially obscured thermal signature. Her pulse quickened. "There," she whispered, pointing to the canyon floor. "That's them. Small heat clusters moving cautiously. The team is alive." Operators leaned in, verifying the feed. Drake's jaw tightened. "If this is accurate, it's extraordinary. Prepare the rescue teams immediately. Emily, you'll coordinate their insertion." Emily's heart raced. The entire operation now depended on her analysis, her ability to guide rescuers in real time. She relayed updated coordinates, factoring in wind, elevation, and potential enemy positions. Every variable mattered. Helicopter crews adjusted flight paths, calculating rotor wash, approach angles, and potential landing hazards. Operators confirmed weapons readiness and communication protocols. The team's success, or failure, would hinge on precision. Meanwhile in the canyon, SEAL Team 7 remained hidden behind jagged rocks. Chief Mason surveyed his team, noting exhaustion, dehydration, and bruises from a rough landing. Their radios were dead beyond the faint static bursts they had sent, leaving them entirely reliant on hope that someone, anyone, was listening. Every creak of sand, every distant wind gust, triggered tense reflexes. Mason whispered, "We hold position until extraction arrives. Low profile. Stay alert." They had no idea that someone hundreds of miles away had just pinpointed their location with astonishing accuracy. Emily's voice, though unheard, was guiding the hands of fate. Back in the operations center, Emily continued her work, monitoring all channels. She double-checked signal strength, adjusted drone angles, and coordinated with helicopter pilots. Every second was critical. As the aircraft prepared to lift off, she overlaid thermal imaging with topographical maps, marking safe landing zones and obstacles. "Pilots," she said into the comms, "you'll approach from the northwest. The canyon opens here. Avoid the ridge to the east. Visibility is low. Adjust rotor speed accordingly." Colonel Drake, observing from behind, shook his head in disbelief. "This is beyond what I imagined. Precision like this, it's unheard of." Emily simply nodded, focusing on the work, her calm exterior hiding the adrenaline racing through her veins. The helicopters lifted off under the cover of night, moving stealthily toward the canyon. Drone feeds provided real-time updates on wind patterns and elevation changes. Emily recalculated approach angles with each passing minute. The rescue team would have mere moments to locate, secure, and evacuate the SEALs before environmental hazards or potential hostiles could intervene. In the canyon, Mason's team sensed movement above. Shadows flitted across the rock walls as rotor blades approached. The team froze, muscles coiled. They had trained for every scenario: ambushes, extraction under fire, environmental hazards, but nothing could prepare them for the relief and tension combined. They didn't yet know they were being rescued. They only felt a shift in the night air. Emily monitored the approach, analyzing every pulse, every feedback from helicopter sensors. She directed the pilots around obstacles, identifying the safest path to the canyon floor. Her calm voice, precise and authoritative, guided their descent. "Hover 20 meters left of the ridge. Adjust rotor pitch, wind gusts incoming. Crew, maintain visual contact with thermal signature." Minutes stretched like hours. Every heartbeat mattered. Emily's calculations, her attention to minute detail, and her intuition were the difference between life and death. Outside, the desert was merciless. Rocks, sand, and sudden cliffs threatened the team's safety. Inside, Emily's mind raced, balancing dozens of variables, recalculating constantly. Finally, the rescue team neared the canyon floor. Thermal signatures confirmed Mason's team. Emily's instructions guided pilots to the safest landing zone while operators coordinated extraction points. Mason whispered to his men, "Prepare to move. Stay sharp." The team moved with practiced efficiency, relying on discipline, training, and now, a lifeline they didn't yet see: Emily Hart. As the first helicopters touched down, rotor wash whipping sand and dust into the air, Emily continued to coordinate. "Move left. Maintain low profile. Extraction underway." Her calculations ensured the team avoided debris, hidden rocks, and potential hazards. Every movement, every second was measured. The SEALs' survival depended on her guidance. Colonel Drake, watching from the operations center, muttered, "I don't know how she does it, but she's saving them." Emily simply kept her focus, monitoring every signal, anticipating every obstacle. Somewhere in the canyon, a team of elite operators, trained for the worst, was about to be guided to safety by a quiet analyst whose work was invisible to most but essential to all. By the time the SEALs realized rescue was at hand, Emily had already secured their path. Every pulse of static, every calculation, every instruction from her was moving them closer to extraction. The night was far from over, the desert dangerous, but for the first time hope had a name: Emily Hart. The desert night was unforgiving. A bitter wind cut through the canyon, rattling loose rocks and carrying sand that stung exposed skin like 1,000 needles. SEAL Team 7 huddled behind a jagged rock outcrop, low enough to avoid being spotted from above, but high enough to keep watch over the narrow canyon. Chief Mason's eyes scanned the shadows, alert for any movement. Every instinct screamed caution. Every sound, the distant cry of a coyote, the scraping of sand, the whisper of the wind, threatened to betray their position. Hours had passed since their mission had gone disastrously wrong. A miscalculated drop point, unforeseen terrain shifts, and the sudden dust storm had forced them miles off course. Their GPS units were either destroyed or hopelessly inaccurate, leaving them blind in a maze of rock and sand. Supplies were dwindling. Water rationed carefully, food long gone, batteries for their remaining electronics fatting. The team's faces were streaked with dust, exhaustion, and determination. Mason whispered to his team, "Stay calm, keep your positions, watch every angle, move only when necessary." Each man nodded, muscles coiled, eyes sharp. They were trained for situations like this, but the uncertainty of rescue gnawed at their focus. They had transmitted emergency pulses, a last-ditch attempt at signaling for help, but whether anyone had heard them or understood them remained unknown. The static bursts they had sent were faint, almost imperceptible. In the vast expanse of desert terrain, any signal risked being drowned out by environmental interference. Yet, somewhere far away, someone was listening. That someone was Emily Hart, tirelessly working in the operations center, isolating frequencies, analyzing waveforms, and triangulating their location. Every pulse of static they had transmitted, no matter how weak, was her lifeline. Mason crouched low, adjusting the team's position. "Wind direction is shifting," he whispered. "Keep cover on the right flank. If anything moves, we need to be ready." The canyon was narrow in places, forcing the team to move cautiously. Each step required precision, each decision measured. The desert was alive with danger, loose rocks that could slide, hidden drop-offs, and the ever-present threat of hostile observers who might spot them. Hours stretched into the night, each second heavier than the last. The team's radios remained largely silent, the faint static bursts their only means of communicating hope. Mason checked his watch repeatedly. They had no idea how long it would take for rescue to arrive, or if rescue would arrive at all. Anxiety was constant, but discipline held them steady. Meanwhile, Emily Hart was working relentlessly. She had cross-referenced multiple receiver stations, analyzed signal degradation due to terrain and wind, and adjusted triangulation with every new data point. Every calculation mattered. She plotted potential obstacles, mapped landing zones for helicopters, and predicted the team's movements based on topography. Her work was invisible to the SEALs, yet it was the only thing keeping hope alive. The first confirmation came in the form of a drone feed. Small, faint heat signatures appeared in the canyon, partially obscured by rocks and sand shadows. Emily's pulse quickened. She relayed the coordinates immediately to the command center and the approaching rescue teams. "Thermal signatures confirmed. Team is alive. Proceed to extraction zone, approach with caution," she instructed. Back in the canyon, Mason's team froze as the faint roar of helicopter blades began to echo through the rocks. Sand and debris whipped around them as the sound grew closer, the distinct rhythm of rescue extraction unmistakable. They didn't yet know if the aircraft were coming for them, or if the night held another threat, but hope surged. Mason whispered, "Positions, stay low, stay calm." He checked each man, eyes alert, weapons ready, muscles tense. The team moved silently, guided only by shadows and instinct, toward a small clearing identified in Emily's coordinates. Every step was measured, careful, necessary. The canyon was unforgiving, with jagged rocks threatening to slow their progress or create noise that could betray them. Above, helicopters adjusted their approach according to Emily's instructions. "Hover 20 meters from the ridge. Adjust rotor pitch for wind gusts," her voice crackled through the comms. Pilots followed her calculations precisely, moving as if guided by an invisible hand. Emily's focus was unrelenting. Every movement in the canyon, every thermal fluctuation, was tracked, analyzed, and incorporated into her live instructions. The team's pace slowed as they neared the extraction point. Sand and rocks made movement treacherous, but Mason's leadership kept them disciplined. "Halfway there, stay low, eyes sharp," he whispered. Each man knew the stakes. They had trained for dangerous terrain, but not for the uncertainty of whether they would ever be found. Yet somewhere far away, Emily Hart was ensuring that their efforts would not be in vain. Finally, the SEALs reached a small plateau, the landing zone identified by Emily's analysis. The first helicopters touched down, rotor wash kicking up a whirlwind of dust and sand. The team crouched low, weapons ready, muscles tensed, waiting for the signal to move. Emily's voice continued over the comms, precise, calm, and critical. Move to the left. Avoid the ridge. Extraction underway. Mason signaled his team. Go, now. They moved in tight formation, disciplined, cautious, trusting their training and the unseen hand guiding them. Dust and wind assaulted their faces, but every step brought them closer to safety. The helicopters adjusted dynamically, following Emily's instructions to avoid obstacles, ensuring that the team's extraction would be smooth and efficient. In the operations center, Emily monitored every movement, analyzing thermal signatures, wind patterns, and helicopter positions. Her calculations were the difference between success and disaster. The SEALs' lives rested entirely on her analysis, on her ability to interpret signals hidden within static and coordinate a complex, dangerous extraction. Mason's team finally reached the first helicopter. Pilots lowered harnesses and ropes, securing the operators. Emily instructed them precisely. Stay low, fasten harnesses. Helicopter will lift straight up, avoid rotor wash zones. The SEALs obeyed, trusting the guidance of a woman they had never seen, relying on a signal she had deciphered from faint static in the desert night. As the team lifted off, rotor blades cutting through the desert darkness, Mason glanced back at the canyon below. It was treacherous, vast, and unforgiving. And yet, thanks to Emily Hart, they were alive. Every calculation, every waveform analysis, every second of painstaking work had guided them from imminent danger to safety. For the first time in hours, Mason allowed himself to exhale. The team was safe, the extraction underway, and the night's terror slowly receding. Emily remained at her station, still monitoring signals, ensuring no mistakes were made. Somewhere in the vast desert, her quiet diligence had saved elite operators' lives. The desert night remained dangerous, but hope had arrived. And that hope had a name, Emily Hart. The desert night seemed alive with danger. Helicopter rotors cut through the darkness, tossing sand and pebbles into violent spirals. Dust blinded the pilots and made every shadow an enemy. Yet inside the operations center, Emily Hart's calm focus anchored the mission. She tracked every movement in real time, analyzing thermal imaging, wind drift, and rotor wash. Every detail mattered. One wrong calculation could cost lives. The SEALs moved cautiously toward the clearing identified by Emily. Chief Mason led, scanning the terrain for threats, muscles coiled, senses alert. The canyon was tight, forcing the team to stay close to rocks and shadowed corners. Dust swirled around them, carried by gusting winds, masking their scent and sounds, but also making navigation treacherous. Every step had to be precise, or a slip could reveal their position or cause injury. Emily adjusted the helicopter approach. Descending 20 meters left of the ridge. Increase rotor pitch slightly to compensate for gusts. Extraction zone secure, she instructed. Pilots obeyed, relying on her calculations rather than their intuition. The desert was unpredictable. The canyon walls funneled wind in strange directions, creating sudden turbulence. Emily recalculated in real time, overlaying topographical maps and live thermal feeds. The slightest error could throw the helicopters off balance, potentially crushing the SEALs or forcing an abort. Below, Mason's team reached the extraction point. The first helicopter hovered over the small plateau, rotor wash kicking up sand into a dense storm that limited visibility. The SEALs crouched low, shields pressed against their bodies, weapons ready. Emily's voice guided every step. Step to the left, avoid ridge rocks, harnesses deployed, fasten quickly. The extraction team worked quickly, lowering harnesses and ropes. Mason secured his men, checking each line meticulously. Sweat streaked his dust-stained face. Move fast, stay low, he whispered. The helicopters rocked slightly in the wind, blades slicing the night air, sand stinging skin and eyes. Each operator followed protocol, trusting training and the unseen analyst guiding them from hundreds of miles away. Suddenly, a distant crack echoed through the canyon, a sound too deliberate to be wind. Mason's team froze. Shadows shifted along a ridge suggesting movement. Enemy scouts, wildlife. The team didn't know, but danger was close. "Stay low, stay quiet," Mason whispered. Emily, monitoring thermal feeds, detected heat signatures moving rapidly along the canyon edges. "Hostiles approaching from northeast. Hold position. Extraction imminent," she instructed calmly. Adrenaline surged. The SEALs crouched behind rocks, weapons ready, while the helicopter crews adjusted their hover to avoid detection. Emily provided continuous guidance. "Elevation 3 degrees north, rotate slowly. Maintain thermal lock on team. Avoid rotor gust on ridge edge." Her calm precision contrasted sharply with the chaos below. Every pulse of static, every calculation, every waveform she had analyzed was now guiding life-or-death decisions. The enemy scouts moved closer, but Mason's team remained hidden. One SEAL whispered, "Do they know we're here?" Mason shook his head. "Doesn't matter. Stay silent. Emily's got this." The acknowledgement of an unseen ally bolstered morale even in the face of fear. Emily's focus never wavered. She recalculated approach angles, factoring in the sudden movements of enemy scouts. She advised helicopter pilots, 2 o'clock ridge, adjust elevation, gusts incoming. Maintain hover 20 meters above plateau, extraction zone secure. Her voice, calm yet commanding, threaded through the comms like a lifeline. Minutes felt like hours as the extraction proceeded. Mason's team moved in coordinated bursts, securing themselves to harnesses while the rotors blasted sand into the night. The SEALs were seasoned operators, yet even they recognized the precision of Emily's guidance. Every instruction timed perfectly, every adjustment saving seconds and reducing risk. Then gunfire erupted, a sudden sharp crack echoing through the canyon. Enemy scouts had spotted movement. Bullets ricocheted off rocks, sending shards of stone into the air. Mason shouted, "Cover, move fast." The team reacted instantly, firing only when necessary, using shadow and terrain for protection. The helicopters remained steady, following Emily's precise instructions. Emily's pulse raced. She monitored every second, recalculating angles and thermal paths, providing live updates. "Shift 5 meters left. Avoid rotor wash. Enemy movement detected east ridge. Extraction window reduced. Move now." Helicopter pilots adjusted instantly. The rotors tilted, hovering in near-perfect balance as the team climbed toward safety. The SEALs moved in perfect coordination. Mason carried a wounded operator over rocky terrain, shielding him from both sand and gunfire. Another SEAL provided suppressing fire, holding enemy scouts at bay long enough for the rest of the team to ascend. The helicopter blades screamed above, controlled chaos blending with meticulous planning. Emily guided the final approach. "Final elevation, hover 3 meters above plateau. Maintain thermal lock. Extraction complete in 60 seconds. Every operator knew their next step could mean survival or disaster. Each movement was measured, precise, rehearsed in training, and now executed with Emily's guidance. One by one, the SEALs were lifted from the canyon floor. Mason was the last to move, covering his team, scanning for threats. Emily's instructions ensured they avoided debris, hidden ridges, and rotor turbulence. The helicopters ascended slowly, carrying the team away from danger. The desert's shadowy expanse stretched below, treacherous and silent once more, yet the operators were alive. Back in the operations center, Emily exhaled, hands finally lowering from the controls. The screen still glowed with live thermal feeds, but the danger had subsided. Every calculation, every waveform, every pulse she had analyzed had guided elite operators safely out of life-threatening terrain. Colonel Drake approached, awe evident in his expression. "I've never seen anything like it. You saved them, every one of them." Emily simply nodded, calm yet exhausted, knowing the work wasn't done until the team was debriefed and safe. Meanwhile, in the helicopters, Mason glanced at his team. Faces were streaked with sand, sweat, and exhaustion. Relief mingled with disbelief. They had faced isolation, hostile terrain, and enemy threats. Yet they had survived, not solely through training or firepower, but because someone had listened, analyzed, and guided them through chaos. Someone like Emily Hart. As the helicopters cleared the canyon, dust swirling behind them, Mason muttered, "I don't know who she is, but she saved our lives." Emily monitored the last few seconds of extraction, confirming each operator was secure. The SEALs were safe. The desert night remained unforgiving, but hope had prevailed, and the quiet analyst, unnoticed for years, had become the linchpin between life and death. The desert night still held a quiet menace as the helicopters lifted SEAL Team 7 from the canyon floor. Dust swirled violently around rotor blades, sand scratching visors and whipping across uniforms. Every second was critical. The canyon had claimed lives before, and its jagged walls offered no mercy to mistakes. The team was exhausted, injured, and wary, but still alert, knowing the danger wasn't over. Chief Mason kept watch over his men as they were lifted to safety. His voice was low but firm. "Stay focused. Keep your weapons ready. We're not out of danger until we clear the canyon." The team nodded, muscles coiled, senses sharpened by adrenaline and survival instinct. They knew that even one misstep could spell disaster. Emily Hart, back at the operations center, monitored every aspect of the extraction. Thermal imaging, rotor angle, wind patterns, and canyon topography streamed across her screens. She adjusted for sudden gusts, real-time shifts in altitude, and possible hidden obstacles. Every calculation mattered. One misstep, and the team could be lost despite the careful rescue plan. "Hold steady," she instructed the pilots. 5 meters higher to avoid the ridge. Wind gust approaching from northwest. Maintain hover. Extraction proceeding, all team members secure. Her calm authority guided the pilots like an invisible hand, ensuring that each helicopter stayed perfectly aligned with the canyon's unpredictable contours. Below, enemy scouts were regrouping, moving stealthily along the canyon edges. Mason's instincts picked up the subtle hints, the faint sound of footsteps, the shimmer of movement against rock. "Contact northeast," he whispered. "Suppressive fire, but keep low. Avoid exposing positions." Each SEAL reacted immediately, maintaining discipline while returning calculated fire. Bullets ricocheted off canyon walls, mixing with the roar of rotor blades, sand, and night wind. Emily's eyes never left the screens. Thermal imaging revealed enemy heat signatures approaching from the northeast ridge. She calculated trajectories, predicted movement, and relayed guidance to pilots. "Shift 5 meters left. Avoid rotor turbulence on East Ridge. Extraction zone secure. Maintain hover. Team advancing." Helicopters adjusted, banking slightly to compensate for the gusts, maintaining perfect alignment with the canyon's narrow pathway. Mason's team moved with precision, covering one another while ascending toward the landing zone. The wounded operator was secured to a harness, another SEAL providing protective fire. Every action had been drilled countless times in training, but now they relied on Emily's unseen guidance to navigate a live battlefield. Every second was measured, every movement coordinated, every decision critical. The first helicopter reached the top of the canyon, hovering just above the rocky plateau. Dust and sand whipped violently, obscuring vision, but the team followed Emily's instructions precisely. "Hold position. Shift slightly north. Maintain thermal lock on team. Extraction window 30 seconds. The pilots adjusted dynamically, compensating for wind turbulence and canyon drafts. Below, Mason glanced at his team. Sweat-streaked faces, bruised arms, and sand-streaked gear told the story of hours behind enemy lines. Yet they moved with disciplined urgency, trusting both training and the invisible analyst coordinating their rescue. Mason muttered under his breath, "She's got this. Stay sharp, stay low." Suddenly, gunfire erupted from the northeast ridge. Enemy scouts had closed in, their positions concealed behind jagged rock formations. Mason signaled his team to return fire while maintaining cover. The canyon echoed with ricochets and rotor noise. Emily's voice cut through the comms calmly, suppressing fire detected. Adjust rotor pitch 2 degrees. Avoid downdraft turbulence. Extraction proceeding. Maintain focus. The SEALs advanced toward the helicopter, moving swiftly, disciplined, and silent despite the chaos. One by one, they were secured, ropes attached to harnesses, as rotor wash whipped sand and rocks. Emily monitored each operator's movement, adjusting coordinates and wind compensations in real time. Her calculations ensured no one collided with canyon walls or rotor turbulence. The wounded operator was lifted next. Mason provided cover, returning precise fire while guiding his team. Emily's instructions were continuous. Hold steady. Shift slightly north to avoid ridge edge. 2 team members remain. Final extraction in progress. The pilots followed her guidance flawlessly, moving as if tethered to her unseen calculations. Finally, Mason was the last to ascend. He scanned the canyon floor, ensuring no one was left behind. Enemy scouts had closed in, but the helicopters maintained perfect positioning, guided entirely by Emily's meticulous adjustments. Mason secured himself to the final rope, checked the team below, and ascended into the night sky. As the helicopters cleared the canyon, Emily's voice remained steady, monitoring rotor stability, team location, and environmental hazards. Extraction complete. Team secure. Maintain hover until clear of canyon. All signals accounted for. Her calm precision had orchestrated a rescue that seemed impossible just hours before. Colonel Drake, observing from the operations center, finally allowed himself a long exhale. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "She just saved an entire SEAL team." Operators around him nodded in awe, still processing the incredible sequence of calculations, real-time adjustments, and life-saving coordination. Inside the helicopters, Mason looked at his team. Faces streaked with dust, sweat, and exhaustion revealed relief and disbelief. They had faced isolation, hostile terrain, and the constant threat of enemy scouts. And yet, thanks to Emily Hart, they were alive. She had interpreted faint static pulses, triangulated coordinates, guided helicopters through treacherous terrain, and orchestrated a precision extraction, all from hundreds of miles away. The desert night receded behind them as they flew toward the safe zone. For the first time in hours, Mason allowed himself to relax, though discipline and caution remained. "We're lucky," he whispered, scanning the team. "Very lucky." Emily monitored the final descent, ensuring no errors occurred. Every signal confirmed the team's safety. She leaned back slightly, exhausted but composed, knowing her work had directly saved lives. The quiet analyst, often unnoticed, had become the linchpin between survival and disaster. As the helicopters cleared the final ridge and approached the base, Mason's team reflected on their ordeal. The desert had been merciless, the enemy relentless, yet hope had arrived in the form of a signal decoded from static and the unwavering focus of a brilliant analyst. Mason shook his head in disbelief. "She saved us," he muttered. "All of us." The team touched down safely. Ground personnel secured the SEALs, attending to wounds and ensuring everyone was accounted for. Emily, monitoring the final confirmation of safety, finally allowed herself a brief smile. Hours of meticulous analysis, unwavering focus, and patience had saved an elite SEAL team from near-certain disaster. The desert night remained harsh, but the impossible had been achieved. The SEALs were safe. The extraction had been flawless, executed with precision under unimaginable conditions. And at the heart of it all, guiding each second, each movement, and each decision, was Emily Hart. The first rays of dawn painted the desert sky in muted shades of gold and red, contrasting sharply with the chaos of the night that had just passed. At the base, SEAL Team 7 stepped off the helicopters, exhausted, bruised, and sand-covered, yet very much alive. Relief washed over the operators like a tide after a long, harrowing storm. They had survived isolation, extreme terrain, and the threat of hostile scouts, all while miles behind enemy lines. Every breath they took now felt heavy with gratitude and disbelief. Chief Mason scanned the team, noting every injury, every fatigue-lined face. "Everyone accounted for?" he asked quietly. The nods were slow, almost reverent. They had endured a nightmare, and the reality of being alive together sank in with profound intensity. He allowed himself a brief exhale, a rare moment of vulnerability in a man trained to endure extremes. Yet even as they walked toward debriefing, Mason's mind was elsewhere. He kept replaying the night, the canyon's narrow confines, the rotor wash that threatened to throw them off balance, the sudden gunfire from scouts, the precision with which the helicopters navigated every ridge and rock. He knew their survival owed far more to unseen hands than their own training. Back in the operations center, Emily Hart removed her headphones for the first time in hours, rubbing her temples in exhaustion. The monitors displayed calm. Thermal imaging confirmed all team members were safe, helicopters were returning to base, and enemy activity had subsided. Emily allowed herself a moment to breathe. The pulse she had traced from the desert static now felt like a heartbeat that had guided an entire mission. Colonel Drake approached, eyes wide with a mixture of relief and admiration. "Emily, you did it. You saved them. Every calculation, every instruction, it worked perfectly." The words were heavy, formal, yet filled with awe. Emily merely nodded, still processing the adrenaline that had kept her alert through the long night. "It was precise, sir," she said softly, her voice calm but steady. "The static pulses were deliberate. I just followed the signals, triangulated positions, and guided the helicopters based on live terrain and thermal data. The rest, the execution, that was the team." Drake shook his head. "Most analysts wouldn't even attempt this. You risked everything, your career, your credibility, on interpreting a signal, and it worked. You saved SEAL Team 7. That's extraordinary." Emily smiled faintly, though her exhaustion was evident. Saving lives had been enough. Accolades were secondary, yet the recognition was deeply deserved. Meanwhile, Mason's team gathered in a secured briefing room. They removed helmets, checked gear, and allowed themselves the first moments of relaxed conversation in what felt like eternity. One SEAL, younger and still wide-eyed from the ordeal, muttered, "Who even knew we were here? How did anyone find us?" Mason's expression softened. "Someone listened. Someone smart, patient, and calm. Her calculations, her signals, we didn't see her, but she saved us." He spoke Emily Hart's name quietly, almost reverently. Every operator nodded in agreement. They had fought the desert, survived hostile scouts, and now owed their lives to an analyst they had never met in the field. The debriefing was thorough. Every aspect of the mission was replayed on monitors: drone footage, helicopter paths, thermal imaging, and radio communications. Emily's contributions were highlighted. The command structure, initially skeptical of deploying rescue based solely on a faint static signal, now recognized that the precision of her analysis had made the difference between life and death. Colonel Drake addressed the entire operations center. "Team, listen up. The extraction was flawless because of discipline, training, and, most importantly, because of Emily Hart. Her analytical work, real-time guidance, and precise calculations orchestrated a rescue that many thought impossible. She's the reason SEAL Team 7 is safe today." Applause rippled across the room, some standing, others wiping sweat and dust from their faces, all acknowledging her contribution. Emily, standing quietly at the back, felt a mixture of pride and humility. She had always worked behind the scenes, unnoticed, her talents reserved for moments that rarely touched the surface. Yet this time, the unseen had become indispensable. She had guided men through life-threatening danger with nothing but static signals, thermal imaging, and sheer analytical rigor. Later, Mason approached Emily personally. His expression was solemn, tinged with gratitude. "I don't think I can ever thank you enough," he said. "We survived because you were listening, calculating, and guiding us the whole time. Every man here owes you his life." Emily's lips curved into a small, tired smile. She had trained for high-pressure analysis, but she had never imagined the real-world impact would feel this weighty. "You did your part too," she said, voice quiet. "I just followed the signals." Mason shook his head. "No, you orchestrated the impossible. Don't underestimate your role. You are part of this team's survival story. As the sun climbed higher, painting the base in bright light, the SEALs and Operations Center staff processed the night's events. The desert had tested every skill, every nerve, every calculation. Yet through chaos, danger, and uncertainty, collaboration, discipline, and analytical brilliance had prevailed. The mission, thought lost, had become a testament to ingenuity, courage, and the power of unseen expertise. Emily returned to her workstation one final time, checking the last of the data feeds. Everything was normal, quiet, calm, and secure. The static pulses had ended, but the echoes of the mission remained. She exhaled slowly, allowing herself a moment of reflection. She had done more than her job. She had bridged the gap between data and survival, numbers and life, static and hope. For SEAL Team 7, the desert night would remain etched in memory forever. The isolation, the fear, the peril. Yet alongside that memory would be one of gratitude and awe of the quiet analyst who had saved them from an impossible situation. Emily Hart had proven that courage and brilliance often come in unseen forms, and that in the most desperate moments, a single person paying attention could change everything. The desert was calm now. The canyon below remained jagged, silent, and merciless. But above it all, the helicopters carried the survivors home, and behind them, a quiet hero had ensured that mission had succeeded. Emily Hart had turned faint static into salvation, transforming an impossible rescue into reality. The story would be told, retold, and remembered, not just for the bravery of SEAL Team 7, but for the analyst who made it all possible. And somewhere in the operations center, Emily finally allowed herself to smile fully, knowing that her work had saved lives, redefined possibilities, and proven that even in the most dangerous situations, hope could be traced through something as simple and as vital as a pulse of static.